Captain Russ Wittenberg was a pilot for the Air Force, Pan Am, and United Airlines. He flew both the 757 and the 767 airplanes that were hijacked on September 11th, so he knows how much practice is needed to fly those planes. He is one of several pilots who doubt that the terrorists could have flown those planes so accurately into small targets. He also doubts that the pilots would give up the cockpit to a couple of guys with razor blades, since that would put everybody in danger, not just a couple of hostages. He would at least expect the pilots to send a distress signal. Our government makes it appear easy to hijack airplanes and fly them into small targets, but many pilots and flight school instructors find the situation difficult to believe. When faced with such contradictions, shouldn't we at least conduct an investigation into what happened at those flight schools? To make the flight training more suspicious, Daniel Hopsticker shows that the flight school in Venice, Florida, had connections to the CIA and was operated by a criminal from Holland. Did the CIA help the terrorists learn to fly? Or were the flight lessons merely to fool us into believing they were capable of flying? To make the situation more ridiculous, a few hijackers are alive in the Middle East. Where did the FBI get these names? And doesn't the FBI verify names before putting them on the most wanted list? How can we use such a sloppy investigation to justify a war? Let's now consider the pilot's risky approach to the Pentagon. The Pentagon is surrounded by tall buildings, trees, and highways. It would be foolish for the terrorist to fly only inches above the ground. It would be best to remain a few hundred feet above the ground, and then dive into the Pentagon. However, the terrorist decided to fly along the ground. The orange arrow shows the direction he was flying when he crashed. This photo makes it easier to realize that the safest way to crash into the Pentagon is to dive into it, while aiming for the center of the 5 rings. However, the terrorist decided to fly along the ground and crash into the building near the helicopter landing pad. The problem with hitting this particular area was that his plane was coming from another direction, so he had to make a 270-degree turn in order to hit that side of the Pentagon. It would have been easier for him to hit Donald Rumsfeld's office. The risky, acrobatic maneuvers of this airplane is enough to convince me that no human was in control of it. I doubt that even the best Air Force pilot could fly a 757 a few inches above obstacles, and at 400 miles per hour. Flight 77 looks tiny in this computer simulation because the Pentagon is the largest office building in the world. More than 20,000 people work there. Many cities do not have as many people as this building. The high concentration of people means that crashing an airplane into the Pentagon could kill thousands of people. What a coincidence that the terrorist hit the only portion of the building that was almost completely empty, because it was being renovated. If the terrorist crashed into any other area of the Pentagon, thousands of people may have died. Furthermore, one of the purposes of the renovation was to increase the strength of the windows and walls, to make them better able to withstand an attack. To summarize this, the pilot took a tremendous risk by flying only inches above the ground at 400 miles per hour, and then he hit the strongest part of the Pentagon, with the fewest number of people in it. An amazing coincidence. The shuttle shattered 40 miles above Texas, while traveling perhaps 12,000 miles per hour. Pieces of the shuttle and the astronauts were found over hundreds of square miles. By comparison, the passengers and debris from Flight 77 were confined to a very tiny area. But where are the pieces? There were only 7 astronauts, but pieces of their bodies were found. There were 64 people on Flight 77, but there is no sign of their bodies, or even their blood. This area is the corridor between rings. There is nothing in this rubble that looks like Flight 77, or pieces of luggage. This hole was supposedly created by Flight 77, but nothing in the rubble would support such a theory. Another photo of building materials and office furniture, not pieces of airplane. Going inside the offices, the only rubble we find is of construction material. There are only a few photos that show scraps that appear to be from an airplane. For example, this is supposedly a piece of the skin of Flight 77. However, this metal seems too thin to belong to such a large airplane. These planes are 155 feet long and 60 tons when empty. The engines are 9 feet in diameter, and they have some heavy steel components. The small figure next to the engines is a 6-foot-tall man to show how large these engines are. The landing gear also contains massive metal components. Even if this scrap belongs to Flight 77, where is the rest of the airplane? How can 60 tons of metal disappear? Water can easily vaporize and drift away in the breeze, but airplanes do not vaporize. Flight 77 also had several tons of people and luggage. Where are they? This delicate scrap looks like it belongs to a Global Hawk or similar-sized drone or missile, not a Boeing 757. The circular object behind the fireman is supposedly part of the engine of Flight 77. Only one of these engine objects was found, but Flight 77 had 2 large engines, not one small engine. Is it a coincidence that a Global Hawk has just one small engine? This piece of landing gear was found inside the Pentagon. This tire rim was also found inside. Unfortunately, these scraps do not prove that Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. A Global Hawk also has tires and landing gear. Is this a piece of Flight 77? It would be helpful if the military would release high-quality photos of these pieces so that we could see them clearly. So why doesn't the military provide better photos? Perhaps because a high-quality photo of this item would show us that it's so small and delicate that it looks like it belongs to a Global Hawk. Here is another thin piece of metal that would fit better on a Global Hawk than a 757. Furthermore, a 757 would leave a total of 60 tons of scrap, not just a few pieces that were so thin that people could pick them up without effort. These tiny scraps of aircraft would make sense if a Global Hawk crashed into the Pentagon, because the Global Hawk was designed to be extremely lightweight. One reason for its low weight is to allow it to remain in the air for a very long time, so it can observe people on the ground for long periods. It can remain in the air for as long as 35 hours. Another reason for its low weight is to reduce the power requirements of the engine, which in turn reduces the noise and heat from the engine. This makes it difficult for people to hear it, or pick it up with infrared sensors. A Global Hawk is like an eggshell with an engine. Christopher Bolin of the American Free Press spoke with Steve Riskus, who saw the plane hit the Pentagon and took these photos of the fire before the firemen arrived. Steve said the plane flew by his windshield, but he did not hear much noise. This could be used as evidence that a Global Hawk or similar quiet aircraft hit the Pentagon. By comparison, the first plane to crash into the World Trade Center was recorded on video because a cameraman heard the plane before it reached him. The microphone of his video recorder also picked up the sound of its engines. However, that plane never came closer to him than about 1,000 feet, whereas the plane at the Pentagon was only inches above the cars. A video available at Blockbuster video stores shows the first airplane hitting the towers. The video is called 9/11, the filmmaker's commemorative edition. Here is a sample of it. That airplane never came closer to the people than about 1,000 feet, but we can clearly hear it. If a Boeing 757 flew 400 miles per hour, only inches above the cars, the noise would have been deafening. Also, people would have felt the vibration from the engines, the turbulence from the wings, and the exhaust from the engines. This photo resembles those from other disasters. Specifically, most of the people are dressed to deal with fire, or they have gloves and work boots. There are no secretaries in high-heeled shoes, nor are there any children. However, a few photos show executives wandering around among the firemen. Who are these two guys? Why are they picking up scraps? They do not have gloves on, nor work boots. They are holding the parts away from their body, which is a sign that they are worried about getting their clothes dirty. So why are they walking around in the firefighting foam, water, human body parts, and sharp scraps of airplane? Why are they so concerned about finding scraps of Flight 77 that they will rush out among the firemen to help them pick up a few scraps? The police are supposed to arrest people who pick up evidence. For example, on February 4th, 2003, 2 people were arrested for picking up space shuttle debris. They faced 10 years in prison and an incredible fine. Why didn't the police arrest these guys? Are these the FBI investigators? If so, why didn't they let the workers with gloves and boots pick the scraps up? A Boeing 757 would leave 60 tons of scrap, in which case these 2 guys would not be able to contribute anything significant to the cleanup. But if a Global Hawk crashed into the Pentagon, there would be only 4 tons of scrap. Furthermore, since more than 50% of a Global Hawk is carbon fiber and resin rather than aluminum, if most of the non-metallic material burned, there would be less than 2 tons of scrap. This would explain the mystery of why there are so few scraps. However, a Global Hawk has aluminum in the body. Any large pieces of aluminum would have to be hidden because they would not look like pieces of a Boeing 757. What a coincidence that some guys carried away a large box, hidden behind a tarp. Some of these guys are overweight. There was no shortage of younger guys in better physical shape, many of whom had gloves and boots. Why would these guys carry away this secret item? What is inside this box, and where did they take it? Why the secrecy if the military has nothing to hide? As if there were not enough strange aspects to the scraps, a news helicopter shows a line of people picking up small items from the grass. Who are these people? They are not firemen or policemen. Why are they picking up evidence at a disaster? This very rapid cleanup also happened at the World Trade Center. At both the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, the cleanup crews were on the site immediately and removed the evidence before the investigators could look at it. At the Pentagon, some of the cleanup crew were executives. If a Global Hawk crashed into the Pentagon, the pieces of carbon fiber would have to be picked up quickly, because if somebody had found a piece of it, he would have announced,
"Hey, this ain't no American Airlines 757. We just got hit by some high-tech aircraft."
Perhaps the reason Flight 77 vanished from radar near Ohio was because it landed at a military base in the area. Then a Global Hawk may have been sent up to replace it. Since a Global Hawk can fly above 60,000 feet, it could fly from Ohio to the Pentagon above the commercial airplanes. Since it is small and more than 50% carbon fiber, it is not as noticeable on radar as commercial airplanes, especially not when flying at 60,000 feet. This would explain why the air traffic controllers never noticed it on their radar as it traveled to the Pentagon. It also flies at 400 miles per hour, which is the speed the military claims Flight 77 was flying when it hit the Pentagon.